Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us right here at ltveh.org. Just look at videos on demand and look for The Writer's Dream. We're also on YouTube. You have to search my name, Linda Maria Frank. I am the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries. Click on my picture and then click on videos and you will see about 150 different interviews. So if you are a reader or a writer, you're interested in finding books from local authors, or you're interested in the art of writing and how to get a book successfully published and marketed, this is the channel to look at, because we have all of these authors who are willing to share with you all of their wonderful advice. We also have a Facebook page called The Writer's Dream, and you can find us there, pretty much the same information. And we hope you come and visit us. If you would like to be on the show, please message me through that Facebook page. And today's guest is Andrea Rothman, and Andrea Rothman is the author of the novel, The DNA of You and Me. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me, Linda.
Good to have you here. I see that your book has won some very good reviews, which is not easy to get, from Publishers Weekly and the Library Journal. These are two very prestigious journals that give out reviews very stingily, shall we say. So that's very good. And you were a research scientist at the Rockefeller University in New York City, which
Correct,
is
yeah.
Prestigious. What was your research about? What did you do your research in?
The sense of smell.
The sense of smell.
Yeah, using mice as a model.
Using mice as models.
Yes.
Okay, so all right. I'm going to read the first chapter of your book. And I want to point out the book is a novel. People look at The DNA of You and Me and they think it's a science book, yes, and it's not. But if you look carefully at the cover, you can see that it's not. Okay, so we're going to read part of chapter 1, and then we can go from there. Smell is an illusion, my father used to tell me. Invisible molecules in the air converted by my brain into cinnamon, cut grass, burning wood. Heat was a measure of receptors in my skin, and there goes my, I'm sorry, there we go. Heat was a measure of receptors in my skin, and brown was not brown, but a combination of light waves captured by cones in my eyes. The world as I knew it, as I felt it to be, was the result of my own personal experience, and so it was up to me to make the best of my understanding of it. Which is so interesting, because that's the science part. The science part can tell you the mechanism of what's going on, but the way you interpret it is different than the way I interpret it.
Yeah, we're each our own world.
I painted my classroom. They redid our classrooms, our science rooms, and I was the last one to get to choose the color scheme. And I didn't like the paints they had, so I went out and I bought paint. And I bought this beautiful shade of French blue. To me, it was French blue. Okay, painted the walls, and the kids came in, and the cabinets were red. And the kids came in and they said, "Why did you paint the room purple?" I said, "Purple? It's French blue." It was a perfect illustration of that. And then I had another experience very similar to that, where I relieved the nurse for lunch. I took over the health office, and she had a Swedish ivy plant, and it was enormous. She obviously had a green thumb, and I would go in every day and I would jostle it because it would give off this incredible odor. And a child would come in with some complaint, and I said, "Can you smell that? Isn't that wonderful?" And they said, What smell? What smell?" And I discovered that some kids could smell it and some couldn't, which of course then brought me to my unit on genetics, where I would give them that phenylthiocarbamide paper with the bitter taste, and some could taste it and some couldn't. So this is a very interesting aspect to me, but that's my science thing. But I digress. Here
We
we go.
both love science.
If it is true that things are what you make of them, it can be argued that it was I who got in the way of Aidan's research, his life, and not the other way around. After all, he had been in the lab for 3 years when I first set foot here. 3 years is a grain of sand in a scientist's life, but when you've been working in someone else's lab for that long, you begin to hunger irrationally for a breakthrough in your work, your modest but unquestionable contribution to human knowledge. Tomorrow I will be receiving an award, an important one. This award marks in many ways the true beginning of my career and a point of no return in my life, the one I sometimes fear will have me forever looking back. At least that is how it feels now and how it felt then when I first got the news last month. Okay, so tell us about the story.
So the news, so first of all, the protagonist, her name is Emily, well, you know, but so she is, the story begins when she's about to receive this award, this very prestigious Lasker Award for all her time spent in the lab doing research on this topic, which is the topic, the science thread of the book. So it's really a retrospect, because really the meat of the story is not really so much about research, but really her encounter with a colleague in that lab, where she started doing her research when she goes to New York. And what happens there, the competition that results from overlapping projects between Emily and Aidan, who are the main characters of the story, and how this impacts both their lives. So really it's how science and the rigors of science and the competition affects their relationship and what ends up happening, you know, their paths in life. The title, actually, this is interesting, I don't know if I ever told you, the original title of the book was Pathfinder. So my publisher thought that would remind people of the car. So then they changed it, and eventually we came up with this name. My editor came up with the DNA of You and Me.
Now, you were in the field of science, but isn't there tremendous competition among scientists? Because basically science work is usually funded by grant money, and so you will have to apply for a grant, and so you have to make U.S. science. Even if the person in the next lab is doing something very similar, you have to make it so that it seems like it's more insightful, better, will help humankind more. Isn't that the competition that exists?
Yeah, I mean, research projects, ideas in themselves are limited, and as kind of you climb the academic ladder, it becomes more and more limiting, because there's more of a struggle to get the money to fund the lab, to carry out a research project that may take 3 years. So it's very competitive. It starts becoming very competitive at a certain stage, and that's kind of the stage where my characters are at. They're both postdocs in a lab in New York City that happens to be a very competitive, very famous lab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And so. What happens between Emily and Aidan?
Well, initially, when she arrives, he's been there for 3 years, and she's very determined to carry out this project. And what she doesn't know is that he's been working on the same project when she goes into the lab. So their projects overlap. Now, so immediately they sort of become rivals in a way, but he misses the mark. As it's very common to miss the mark in research, sometimes things just don't.
You hit a dead end.
You hit a dead end, things don't work out as you thought they would. And so she discovers a gene that has some potential. And then Aidan is given an ultimatum by the head of the lab. It's like, either you leave or you help her, you help Emily in her research. And then they end up working together, grudgingly at first. But then eventually they have a relationship, and the story takes off at that point, really, what happens between them. Now, they're very different people.
Now, do you address the issue of competition between men and women, how women are treated differently, or are they? Or what are the main science issues that you deal with in the book?
Yeah, so that's a really great question because that is an issue. Women in science is a huge issue, but that is not the issue that I deal with, that I write about. Because in the lab, really everybody's sort of equal. I mean, women ultimately have the issue, and I do touch upon that you know, there's a limited reproductive window, and that is going to affect women's decisions more dramatically than men's. So Emily does deal with that aspect, but in terms of competition between male and female, that's not something that I really go into in the novel.
Okay, so what about this?
It's competition in general, really.
Right, okay, so in the process of the research that goes on in the lab, are there problems with the research? Are there integrity issues?
There are integrity issues, and that's also one of the main plot points.
Yeah, because people think that, I think the general public thinks that scientists go into the lab and they do their research, make their discoveries, and everything is clear cut. And
yeah, it takes years really to make a discovery, and some people really they discover minor things. They don't, you know, in Emily's case, you know, this is a fictional character. She discovers a group of genes that is tremendously important in neuroscience. That is something that you know, she's lucky to have found these genes, and she went to the lab at the right time. So there's like, you know, one case in hundreds and thousands. It doesn't happen every day. When I was a scientist, I discovered many things, but nothing tremendously that impactful that would really.
Well, that's. Sometimes it's all the little pieces that eventually lead to something that's impactful. So what was the gene that she discovers?
So it's called a Pathfinder, so that's why
the title
originally was Pathfinder. And this Pathfinder is sort of a guidance protein that helps neurons, smell neurons, reach the places in their brain where they need to go to, so to enable smell, to make smell possible.
For you to interpret the sensation. Yeah, which is fascinating.
And which is also metaphorical to her life, to where she's going to be, what's going to happen to her, you know, 12 years down the road, 20 years down the road. When I mention it was a retrospect, it really is, and everything in the beginning that takes place in the beginning is a result of what happened 12 years ago in her life.
Okay, so you said that the book is divided into 5 parts, right? And you said that the 5 parts really do indicate
where they're at.
So,
where they're at in their research. So the stages.
The first one is really, I think,
genes.
the wrong gene.
Yeah.
So
she
finds the wrong gene, or he's the wrong gene.
He finds the wrong gene. The wrong gene.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then a bridge, which I'm assuming is the...
A bridge has to do with a small fictional part of the, again metaphorical, of the gene that functions as a bridge between them when they begin working together.
So these are all science terms, because the third one is recombination. And of course, I think even the general public kind of gets the idea of recombination because they like to, there's such controversy about recombined genes and genetic food and all the rest of it. So they get that idea. The next one I love is chimera, because chimera from Greek mythology is a monster made from many parts. So
and
is
it
that
means
their
fantasy
romance?
Also. Kind of. Things get ugly, but it also means fantasy.
Well, and the last one is the issue of memory. So I'm assuming that.
Yeah, it's her looking back.
That's the retrospective. So, what was the best part of writing this book?
The best part, for me, the funnest part was figuring out the story, figuring out what was going to happen. You know, when I realized what the end was going to be, that to me was breathtaking. After that, I could have said, and then I went all the way back to the beginning and I started rewriting. And I could have gone back and back and back. And just to reach that end, to know, I had to go through a lot. So it's like going up a mountain and reaching the peak and seeing, you're at the summit, you see a gorgeous town below. It doesn't matter, you'll go up there and you'll stand there, how long it takes.
Yeah, well that's if you really are happy with your story, that's where you end up. What was the hardest part?
The hardest part was, there were many hard parts. This is my first novel, and my native language is Spanish. Mm-hmm. So initially I was a little flustered. I was feeling a little bit insecure about the language. Mm-hmm. In general, even though I've read extensively in English. But after that, after I developed her voice, I think that was the hardest part, because it's told in the first person. So once I developed her voice and I knew how she spoke, that kind of guided me. It was great.
So, that's interesting. If your character doesn't have a voice that captures the reader, I think the book falls flat.
Yeah.
I've read some very interesting books in my time, but if I don't like the characters, it's hard to get to the end of the book. I have to like my characters, either like them or hate them. You have to have some emotional connection with these characters, and I think you, because you worked in the field of science, could definitely give a voice to this character, to Emily, and go through her suffering and her feelings of
regret,
regrets, and also we all have these feelings of not being able to live up to our ideals, of incompetence. Sometimes we feel incompetent, and sometimes that's what really makes the character, I think, in my estimation, when the character's flawed.
Yeah.
And then then you can really relate to them, because we're all flawed, and I think the things we remember in our life are about the struggles, so to speak. So that's important. Now, so we have plot, character, and setting. The setting is a lab.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you make the lab exciting?
Well,
that's a hard question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It is. How did I make the lab exciting? Okay, I'll answer that right now. There's a bridge outside the lab.
Yes.
Through the window.
The 59th Street Bridge.
The 59th Street Bridge. And that kind of gave everything color. Everything came alive with the bridge. Because inside the lab, there's really, it's the presence of the characters in the lab what makes the book.
Yeah.
But when they stare out the window, when she stares out the window and sees that bridge, it's very resonant, symbolic, really, of the relationship she wants to build with Aiden, and of what she wants to accomplish in science. So in a sense, she wants everything. She wants to have, to make it in her career, and she also wants to have this relationship with this person.
Yeah, well, that's what we always want, everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the hardest part of life, is making those compromises where you can't have everything. So and I think any place that's set in New York City, looking out the window is going to give you something interesting to watch. But I used to walk over the 59th Street Bridge. I did volunteer work in a hospital on Roosevelt Island.
Oh, wow.
And so we walked over the bridge.
It's a gorgeous walk.
Oh, yeah. So is the Brooklyn Bridge. But anyway, I'm off the subject again. So now the plot, you pretty much explained the plot, and I don't want to get into talking about the plot too much, because I want people to read the book. But I like the idea of the tension between the two characters, and certainly the science is interesting. Now, I would like to read a review, if you don't mind. Okay, so Rothman's debut novel is a fierce and eloquent exploration of what it is to be a woman working in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. A scientist in the cutthroat world of cutting-edge research and academia. It invites us into the heart and mind of Emily, a character we grow to respect and admire, who is faced with the messy business of a budding romance with a colleague in a laboratory where she works. Should she allow herself to put all she holds dear at risk, or should she smell a lab rat? This one's a powerful literary page-turner. Well, that's a great review. I like the idea of bringing forth that she has to struggle with making choices, because that's pretty much what we end up. And I like, they really pique your interest with the smell of lab rat.
Yeah.
Who's the lab rat? I have 2 cousins who are scientists, and they sometimes will tell me stories about what goes on in the lab and with their research. And I think both of them were very idealistic when they started, and not so much anymore. So it's too bad.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is. It is a shame, because science is very important. But again, I think we also live in an age right now where science is struggling with society.
Yes.
Because, and I really have a hard time with this, because science affords us so much of what's good in our lives. Cures for disease.
Completely agreed.
And all of our technology and whatnot, but then sometimes technology.
Yeah, I
So-
think a lot comes from basic research. Everything.
Sure.
If you think about
Sure.
it, everything.
Sure. And I find that in this country, there are so many people who are science phobic. And when I get into a discussion with them, I tell them, well, then throw your hairdryer out.
Microwave.
Yeah. Your phone, get rid of that
Everything.
too.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what are you doing to market the book?
So my publisher is doing everything.
Oh, you are so lucky. You are so lucky. But are you, do you think it's enough, or?
It's never enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I could, it's really never enough. I mean, ideally we'd like the book to reach everybody who would be interested in reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And even people who think they might not, that this is not necessarily their cup of tea, but would give it a try and like it.
Do you do book talks?
Book talks, you mean?
Go to a group of people and talk about the book.
Oh yeah, I've been on panels and,
Okay.
and and interviews, had
Because-
interviews. And
Because I would think in the scientific community they would be interested in
yes,
this kind of thing, and selling books to, like, I don't know, I think of Cold Spring Harbor Lab, where
Yeah.
they do lectures there. Have you done a lecture there?
no,
They
I
probably
did.
would let you do that.
That would be great. I did in Hunter College, and it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, because
a
they
great
do all
lecture.
kinds of lectures there. You just have to really go up there and find that they have a sort of a community relations manager.
Yeah,
I bet that would be a great place.
that would actually
That's
be
a
a great
beautiful
idea.
campus.
I know.
Yeah, I visited there. So many Nobel Prizes have come out of there.
Yes.
Yeah, we find Long Island is an interesting place for that. Have you done any other TV interviews, radio interviews?
I've done a lot of interviews,
Mm-hmm.
a lot for print, for radio, for YouTube. This is my first TV
All right.
interview, so it's great.
Well, good. I hope you enjoyed it. If someone came up to you, someone, I don't know, a colleague or something, and said, I'd like to write a book too. I think I have a story. What advice would you give them?
First of all, read a lot.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Kind of have an idea about what you're writing about the story you want to write, and the kind of writer you are, and then trust your instincts. And the other thing I do, which I really believe in, is I write my dreams. I really write my dreams, and I think that helps me in my writing. It kind of frees me.
I like
when
your
I
writing
write.
style. It's very easy to read, and you're drawn in right away, because
Thank
there
you.
is like that stream of consciousness, more or less. Remembering what your father said to you,
Yeah.
and then moving on to, and then the further paragraphs get into a conversation with a colleague about winning the award.
Yeah.
And I think that's loving the character. Getting into the character, and you can't love the character until you let the character let you into their heads,
Yes.
by allowing them their thoughts.
Yeah.
And your advice about reading a lot, people who come to me and ask me about writing, that's what I tell them. Read books and find a style that you
Yes,
really like
exactly.
and imitate their style to begin with. And then eventually, if you keep writing, you'll develop a style of your own.
Yes, inevitably you'll develop a style of your own.
Yeah.
But the key is really to read the things you love, and that might evolve. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
all the time, but you just have to keep reading all the time. It's just essential.
I think
to keep
so,
reading.
yeah. And also it gives you, because if you're a writer, you really have to have a knowledge base.
Yeah.
People have asked me also the question about writer's block, and I tell them, even if you're writing a simple romance story that takes place in a small town in, I don't know where, research the small town. I bet you're going to find a lot of interesting things that happened in
That's
that
right.
town that you can bring into your book, and it'll make the writer's block go away because you'll have something to add to the story.
Yeah, instantly.
So that's where I'm at with the book I'm writing. I have writer's block with it, but my place is fictitious. It's a fictional place.
Oh, so you can't visit.
So I'm going to have
You
to
have
go.
to.
I'm going to have to go find someplace like it and come up with something. But it'll eventually happen. And do you recommend spending the time to get a traditional publisher, or do you think that if you had to do it over again, you would self-publish?
No, I would probably do again a traditional publisher. I do recommend, I think it's worth it definitely to spend time, at least several months, trying to get an agent. That's kind of the route to go, an agent, and then the agent will try to sell it to a publishing house. So I would recommend that route, but if not, self-publishing is fine too.
Yeah.
It's really all about making your book reach the people who will love, the readers who will love it.
Yeah,
It's
you
all
have-
about that in the end, and that can happen in many ways, in many different ways.
That's right. Find your audience.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so good luck with the book. Do you have something
so
else
much.
coming?
Something else to say?
Something else coming? No, another
Well,
book.
I'm writing 2 books at the same time.
Oh,
right
good.
now, so 2 novels. Yeah.
So what are they about?
Well-
Briefly, just briefly, because we have 5 seconds.
Well, I was about to say they're not about science, but that's not true. One is about science, and it's about geology. But it
Okay.
doesn't go as deeply into science as this one does, as The DNA of You and Me does. And the other one is more historical fiction.
Okay.
And I'm just still trying to figure it out, and it's told from the point of view of 3 characters. So I'm playing around with that right now, and I'm having fun, and it's great.